You're not caught up? You're in the right place. Two-time defending Cy Young winner, traded 2 days before the deadline to the team that already had the best rotation in baseball. If you had Dodgers get the best pitcher on the planet for a couple of minor leaguers on your 2026 bingo card, congrats. You know how this league works by now. This is the Tarik Skubal trade, and there's way more to it than just another rich get richer headline. Let's get into it. Okay, so this one's actually kind of insane. Tarik Skubal, back-to-back Cy Young winner, arguably the best pitcher on the planet right now, just got traded from the Detroit Tigers to the Los Angeles Dodgers 2 days before the deadline. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Of course it's the Dodgers. It's always the Dodgers. But stick with me, because there's a lot more going on here than just the rich getting richer. Let's start with the actual deal, because the return is honestly the most interesting part of this whole thing. LA sends over outfielder Zaire Hope, pitcher River Ryan, and pitcher Brady Smith. In return, they get a guy who's a two-time reigning Cy Young winner, sitting at a 2.79 ERA this year, with well over 100 strikeouts against basically no walks. And here's the part that makes this trade so wild. This is a pure rental. Skubal hits free agency in a couple months, no matter what happens the rest of this season. He's expected to command something in the $350 to $400 million range this winter, which would make him the highest paid pitcher in baseball history. So the Dodgers basically just rented the best pitcher on the planet for a 2-month tryout, and all it cost them was 3 players who weren't even on their active roster. Now, if you're a Tigers fan, I actually feel for you a little bit here. This guy was drafted by Detroit in the ninth round back in 2018. He turned himself into the best pitcher alive on a team that hadn't given much reason to stick around outside of loyalty. And after this year, watching him walk out the door for prospects instead of watching him pitch a playoff run, that's pretty rough. It's the kind of thing that stings way worse than losing in the standings. But here's the counter to that. Nobody made Detroit do this. The front office looked at where the team was, looked at the fact that Skubal walks in free agency regardless of what they do, and decided cashing him in now for 3 controllable, cost-effective players was smarter than risking losing him for nothing next spring. That's not a villain move. That's just asset management. It's the exact same logic as a football team trading a star running back a year before his contract's up, instead of watching him walk for a compensatory pick nobody wants. Now, let's actually talk about what this means for the roster, because this is where it gets a little unfair, not gonna lie. The Dodgers already had Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who was the World Series MVP last postseason. They've got Blake Snell, a 2-time Cy Young winner himself, working his way back from injury. They've got Tyler Glass now doing the same. And they've still got Shohei Ohtani, who's dealing with a knee issue right now, but is expected back on the mound at some point too. So you're talking about a rotation that, if everybody's healthy at the same time, has 5 former Cy Young caliber arms in it. That's not a normal team. That's a fantasy football roster where somebody already has Christian McCaffrey and then trades 2 bench guys for Bijan Robinson too, just because they can. At some point, it stops looking like a real division and starts looking like a video game roster on easy mode. But here's the thing that gets lost every single time the Dodgers do this, and they do this a lot. Nobody's stopping the other 29 teams from building the same way. Multiple teams were reportedly in the mix for Skubal. Milwaukee had pieces that could have gotten a deal done. Tampa Bay had pieces too. But when it actually came down to pulling the trigger and giving up real ranked prospects for a 2-month rental, it was the Dodgers who said yes, first and fastest. And that's not really about who has the most money in the bank. Teams like the Mets have a bigger payroll than the Dodgers this year, and they're nowhere close to this. This is about which front office is actually willing to stomach the risk. The Dodgers gave up their 5th best prospect and their 7th best prospect for 2 months of a rental ace, and they did it without blinking. Most front offices in this league play it safe. The Dodgers just don't. And honestly, the part of this trade that deserves way more attention than it's getting is where these 3 players actually came from in the first place, because none of them started out as Dodgers. Zaire Hope, the headliner of the return, wasn't even drafted by LA. He was an 11th round pick by the Cubs who barely got looked at because he skipped most of the showcase circuit. The Dodgers landed him back in a January 2024 trade when they sent Michael Busch to Chicago, and that trade made total sense for both sides at the time. Busch was blocked at first base by Freddie Freeman. He didn't really have a defensive home anywhere on that roster, so the Dodgers flipped a guy with no path to playing time in LA for a total unknown outfield prospect. 2 years later, that unknown prospect is a top 30 guy in all of baseball and the headline piece in a trade for a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. River Ryan is basically the same story. The Dodgers got him years back in a trade for Matt Beatty, a guy who was barely hanging on to a bench spot and isn't even in the majors anymore. And Brady Smith, the third piece heading to Detroit, was just a third round pick from a few years ago, nowhere close to a premium pick. So when you actually trace the whole chain back, the Dodgers turned a first baseman with no position, a replacement level bench guy, and a mid-round draft pick into arguably the best pitcher in baseball. That's the part that should honestly worry the rest of the league more than the payroll does. Anybody with enough money can spend. Not every front office can turn spare parts like that into a Cy Young winner 2 years later. There's also a longer term piece to this that I think matters more than people realize. Skubal is walking into free agency this winter no matter what, and now the Dodgers get an entire postseason run to basically audition him in person, build a relationship, show him the culture, and show him what winning looks like there. Teams have done this before, get a guy on a rental, treat him well, and suddenly he's a lot more likely to sign back in the offseason instead of testing the full market. It doesn't guarantee anything, especially with an agent who's going to want a bidding war, but it's a real advantage. It's like dating someone for 2 months before the actual relationship starts instead of going in cold on the first date and hoping it works out. And look, there's a bigger conversation happening around this too, with the league potentially heading towards a lockout and talks of a salary cap down the road. A trade like this is only going to add fuel to the fire because it's proof of exactly what small and mid-market teams are worried about, that no matter what rule exists right now, one organization can just outspend and outdevelop everybody else at the same time. That's a legitimate concern for the health of the sport long term, and it's worth taking seriously instead of just brushing it off. But here's where I actually push back a little on the Dodgers are ruining baseball take, because when you look at the actual facts, it's not really a money story, it's a talent evaluation story. The Dodgers haven't picked in the top 10 of the draft since 2006. That's 2 decades of never getting the benefit of a high pick, which is usually the easiest way to stock a farm system. And yet entering this season, they were ranked as the number 2 farm system in all of baseball, and by the middle of this year, they led the entire league with 9 prospects on the national top 100 list, more than any other organization. That doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen because of payroll. You can't buy your way into having the best player development pipeline in the sport. Compare that to a team like the Angels, who've had some of the highest payrolls in baseball for over a decade, features one of the greatest players ever in Mike Trout, and still can't buy their way into a playoff win. Money clearly isn't the deciding factor by itself, or the Angels would be a dynasty right now instead of a cautionary tale. What the Dodgers are actually doing is scouting better, developing better, and turning marginal asset into real value over and over again, which is exactly what happened with the Bush to Hope chain we just talked about. That's not cheating. That's just an organization that's better at the actual baseball part of baseball than everybody else. And it's fair to be annoyed about that, but it's a different problem than just they spend the most. So where does this actually leave things? The Dodgers were already the favorite to three-peat before this trade happened. Now they've added arguably the best pitcher available anywhere in baseball, and they did it without giving up a single player from their active big league roster. If everybody stays healthy in October, this is genuinely one of the scariest playoff rosters we've ever seen assembled. Is that great for competitive balance across the league? Probably not, and that's a fair thing to be frustrated about. But is it impressive team building? Yes. The rest of the league just got put on notice with 2 months left in the regular season, and everybody's going to be watching to see if it actually pays off in October. Alright, that's the story for this week. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Is this good for baseball or bad for baseball? See you next week.